Seth, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited about having this conversation with you and also grateful that you were able to join. Lots to cover, as you can appreciate. But before we get started, I just want to give listeners an opportunity to know a little bit about yourself and who you are. But yeah, if you don't mind sharing a little bit just to get us started here.
Yeah, sure. Mostly a journalist and filmmaker, but I'm also the co-author of the book Our Polyvagal World: How Safety and Trauma Change Us, which I wrote with Dr. Seth Porges, who it's not just a coincidence we have the same last name. He's also my father.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because I also read The Myth of Normal, which was written by Dr. Gabor Mate and
Mhm.
his son. So just out of personal curiosity, how is it working with your dad and writing a book together? Like, how was that journey?
It was awesome. Getting to do this with my dad was really a true joy. He, this book is really taking his work, and I view it as a work of translation. A lot of what's been written out there about polyvagal theory, about the human nervous system, about trauma is very clinical or academic and difficult for normal people to understand. And our goal was to take all this information, a lot of his work and as well as some other folks, and make it understandable, make it something that just makes sense for people based on their own life experiences.
Yeah, yeah, no, that sounds great. And just for listeners that are not familiar with polyvagal theory, just
Yeah.
walk us through it a little bit. Obviously, it's become more prominent, especially in the therapy world, which I'm involved in. We understand a little bit better. But for most people who hear the term, it is quite, it's become part of the pop psychology world. But I just want to give listeners an opportunity to also understand what is it?
Yeah. We, it's a couple things in most
Yeah.
simple, basic language. We put this, I think, on the very first page of the book. What polyvagal theory is all about is how our bodies and our brains and our everything's change based on one simple question. And that is, how safe does our body judge itself to be? How safe are we? Not how safe are we literally, but how safe does our nervous system believe it to be? And really what polyvagal theory says is how safe we feel is crucial to our mental and physical health and happiness. And so this real simple thing, do I feel safe or do I feel under threat, is this dictating force that influences so much about how our body operates and about how we experience the world on a sensory level, on an emotional level, on an everything level. When we feel safe, it's pretty simple, honestly, when you begin to think about it. Our bodies evolved a long time ago when resources were fairly limited. Today, you can just go to McDonald's and get all the resources you want. But back in the day, metabolic resources could be scarce. And so our bodies had to distribute them appropriately, they had to ration. And so our bodies had to determine at any given moment, am I in a state of immediate threat or not? And if you're in a state of immediate threat, that is the priority, survival. So all your resources go towards evading that immediate threat. You've all heard of fight or flight. There's also some other systems that play there, right? Whereas if your body determines itself to be safe, it can turn off these defensive systems that are incredibly resource intensive and instead put those resources towards long-term health growth and restoration. So our body can either put stuff towards long-term health growth and restoration or immediate survival, but it can't do both at the same time, right? And when we're in
Right.
the state of long-term health growth and restoration, that's also when our body's resources systems allow us to be social, allow our brains to be creative, allow us to think independently, allow us to experience the world, honestly, in a very much more pleasant and fulfilling way. And I think this is especially relevant these days, 'cause I think a lot of people are dealing with feelings of pervasive threat, feelings of trauma, feelings of anxiety, feelings of stress all the time. And in many ways, we now live in a world that's uniquely engineered and even optimized to trigger those feelings. If you're
Right.
staring at social media or cable news, all they care about is engagement. Are you watching? Are you staring? And they engage us. So this is why we've all heard the term like doom scrolling. You just can't stop. And these systems, these algorithms are often made without morality. They're just made based on engagement, and that harms our health. And I think now people are beginning to realize that, wait a second, I'm constantly stressed, I'm constantly anxious, and my health is suffering. My things feel
Mhm.
differently. My ability to be around people is different. My ability to experience things I once loved and liked is different. And that's what polyvagal theory is all about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that explanation. And I do want to touch on the media and social media aspect later on, because I believe that there is a bit of a philosophical discussion there to be had.
Mhm.
However, also touching on what you shared from an evolutionary perspective, our brain was designed to respond to threats, right? And to
Yes.
your point, if we're constantly in a state of stress or threat, our brain is allocating all the resources to focus on responding and be on that alert, which often shuts our immune system down. So a lot of
Yes.
times, or at least what I've observed with people, is when they're constantly on high alert or constantly feeling stressed, they start having other chronic issues because their immune system's not responding. And how does that factor into this theory and the role that the vagus nerve plays when it comes to how our body's responding?
Yeah. Polyvagal theory posits that trauma, which in many ways is experiencing events where it might be that kind of changes the goalposts about when your body allows itself to feel safe. It can create conditioning where things that once felt safe no longer can result in always feeling unsafe, always feeling under threat. Trauma itself, according to polyvagal theory, is a pre-existing condition that makes us more
Mhm.
susceptible to almost any physical or mental ailment you can imagine. My father actually did a study in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic in which this is back in it. Everybody's had COVID at this point. The thing has mutated so many
Mhm.
times. But in the early days, when 10% of people had it, when it wasn't that common, they did a study and they found that virtually every, and this is like more than 1,000 people in a study, a large scale study, virtually everybody in the study who had COVID at that point in 2020 had a trauma history. And virtually everybody who did not have COVID did not have a trauma history. It was almost a direct correlation. And what does that tell us? It doesn't tell us
Mhm.
that COVID equals trauma or anything like that. What it tells us is that trauma and feelings of threat, they make the body, they make the immune system, they make our natural defenses more susceptible to almost any probably virus, right? Almost any physical ailment, almost anything. It really is like our body's wounds heal slower when we feel threatened, when we're in these states, right? Like our body has these resources. They're either being put towards immediate survival or body healing itself. And with polyvagal theory, and the reason it's, I think, caught on a lot in various clinical worlds is because it's optimistic at the end of the day. It talks about how with the body is very resilient, the body is very capable of healing itself, but only when it's given the opportunity to feel safe. And that there leads to all sorts of interesting ideas. Well, what can we do to make ourselves and other people feel safe? What can we do in a clinical environment, in a therapeutic environment, in a hospital environment, in an educational environment, in a home environment? What can we do? How do things transform and change when we start prioritizing this really simple concept that many people view as non-existent or maybe frivolous, which is feelings of safety?
Great. Yeah. No, and I appreciate that exploration further. I guess one of the things we touched on offline was around this whole notion around fight or flight and trying
Mhm.
to equate polyvagal theory with that, which I think is almost a simplistic way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I
The
understand.
body, yeah. Fight or flight is what the scientific world they'd call it sympathetic nervous system or sympathetic
Yeah.
activation, fight or flight. And it is simple though. That's the thing. And that's what's the beautiful about polyvagal theory. It's actually not that complex. We have
Mhm.
this system in our body, this sort of internal danger detection radar system that Dr. Porges, my father, calls neuroception, which is this unconscious kind of ability for our nervous systems and our bodies to constantly scan the world around us and figure out, am I safe or not? And you all get this. If you come into contact with some people, they make you feel relaxed and you have charisma and charm and all that kind of stuff. You come into contact with others, you're like, oh, there's things that just make us
Yeah.
feel different ways. That's what neuroception is. And it operates to some degree. There's universal kind of truths about how it operates, but it's also individual differences. And those individual differences can be innate or driven by past experience. If you're around something horrific, things that remind you of that are going to make you feel bad. And
Mhm.
depending on how safe your nervous system judges it to be, your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, the word autonomic means automatic. So all this conscious, which is everything in your body, it's outside your conscious control, which is most bodily functions, right? They
Mhm.
change how they operate, right? So when you're in a state of safety, and we use this color coded traffic light system to describe this for simplicity. So when you're in a state of safety, we call it the green state is activating. This is the parasympathetic nervous system. This is your rest, relax, social nervous system. And this kind of magic trick occurs when we feel safe, where our body is able to put resources towards health, growth, and restoration, but also it resources the cranial nerves and muscles that allow us to be socially expressive. It allows our face to come alive, our voice to express emotion, our shoulders to shrug. All of these things only really are turned on when we feel safe. When we're in a state of threat, we have flatter facial affect, a monotone voice. We're less socially expressive. And this is key to how we both, this is how we express safety to other people, right? So if you're talking in a very kind of safe, social, highly engaged way, other people, their nervous system sense it and it tells their nervous systems that we're actually not under threat right now. One of the key
Right.
tools our neuroception uses to determine whether we're safe or not is how safe are other people around us coming off as, right? That's key. Well, let's say your neuroception scans the world around it and determines it's a state of danger. We go into what we call the yellow in this traffic light system zone. This is your fight or flight or sympathetic nervous system. This is mobilization. This is activation. But then there's this other state that many people didn't acknowledge until honestly not that long ago. I think more people are beginning to understand this. And that's what we call the red state, which is a different part of the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is not a mobilization or activation state. This is one of freezing, dissociation, and shutdown. And this is one that's, I think, so important for people to just understand and acknowledge, because I think we as society often, in the way we approach people who might be victims, people who might have experienced trauma, people might have experienced assault, we're very judgy. We might say that it was only an assault if somebody fought back or there are signs it was true. When in truth, when we're under severe duress, our bodies can and often do shut down, fully dissociate. And it's totally outside of our conscious control. And I think that's just a really important thing. And so you have these three basic color coded systems, but then you have a little bit of mixing and matching that occurs, like cocktails, right? Autonomic cocktails. So imagine you're playing basketball with some friends. You're doing this highly mobile, very physical game. Well, you're tapping into the sympathetic, the fight or flight, the yellow state for that mobility, but it's in a state of safety and sociability. So it's also the green state. And this is, we call this the autonomic state of play. Children, dogs, they instinctively play. They instinctively are very physical, very mobile, but also not expressing threat or danger to each other. And
Right.
polyvagal theory kind of looks at this and says, what is this? Why do we do this? Why is this innate to mammals? And what polyvagal theory posits is that the state of play is basically a neural exercise that allows our bodies to tap into the states of defense when needed without getting stuck there. And that's really important. And so when you look at when I was growing up, like schools were cutting recess left and right, games and sports, they were viewed as frivolous activities. Polyvagal theory kind of posits really important for our nervous system's health and our body's ability to be resilient against the threats and stresses of the world around us.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it, to your point, with the elimination of play in schools, that is problematic because I think that's a separate issue that we can perhaps touch on. But at the same time, I think as we go through experiences in life, we lose that sense of play, right? To your point, perhaps we don't feel safety because of some experiences we've had as children where maybe we had some threat. And then we're in that constant state of, again, coming back to what we talked about earlier, just in that sense of fight or flight
Yeah.
and walking around feeling threatened. And that again impacts us. Now, one of the things here with the theory, as you've mentioned here, it's very valuable in the sense that once you are able to understand perhaps what's going on for yourself, that can give you agency that, oh, okay, now I understand how I can deal with this. But sometimes people get caught in the trauma loop too, where then they start feeling like the victim that, oh, all these things happen to me. And that's where I think, you're not really taking agency or your power back to be able to heal. So what, in terms of what are your thoughts when having this information and this knowledge, what can people do with it to move forward?
Yeah. And I gotta be careful about what I say because I'm not a clinician, I'm not a therapist. But I think I find polyvagal theory to be immensely empowering. And because I think we live in a society that oftentimes is at odds with our own feelings. oftentimes at odds with our own innate needs, right? Like we're told that hanging out with friends or going dancing or playing or dinner parties, all these things are frivolous rewards. We're thrown onto the hamster wheel often and just produce, right? We live in a world that oftentimes monitors every little thing we do. A lot of people's professions, like they're incredibly driven by spreadsheets or data or GPSs or cameras, whatever it is. And that stuff, our bodies sense that. It makes us feel not safe. That harms our health. And I think beginning to understand just, okay, if you feel a certain way, you should listen to it. Also ask yourself, what makes you feel good? What makes you feel safe? It could be lighting, it could be acoustics, it could be aesthetics, it could be these things that actually don't take much effort or resource, but also understanding that everybody needs a little bit of time to like decompress and feel peace and feel safe. We're really resilient creatures. We really are, but we all need a little bit of time to cool off and allow our bodies to feel safe and not on guard and all of those things so we can recharge our batteries. I think a lot of people who might be working very hard, perhaps have families they need to take care of, may put their own needs in that regard on the back burner, view them as secondary. But really, the truth is, people around us can sense our autonomic state. It's a key factor in how safe they feel. And if you don't allow yourself to feel safe, the people around you can't feel safe either.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. And I think as parents, you can influence your children as well, trying to create that environment of safety. But then also to your point, even in your social circles, right? If you're on that high alert, other people can pick up on it and perhaps you may attract similar people or others may not enjoy being around you just because of the state you're presenting. The the other piece you touched on was the ability to slow down, right? Like you talked about us living in a world where we're on this constant hamster wheel. I think that's become a problem too, because a lot of people are not able to sit with themselves and look inward in terms of realizing, okay, what state am I operating in? What does my body need right now? And that information can be amazing in terms of how to respond and perhaps even paying attention to what you need in that moment. And to your point, also, we end up putting our needs on the back burner.
We
And then
do.
we're in this
Yeah.
constant state. And we're perhaps not even getting appropriate sleep. We're just on the go constantly. And I think right now in society, that's become a big issue. And obviously, there are unintended consequences, which we don't see immediately, but pay for it later down the line.
We absolutely do. And I think what's so liberating about polyvagal theory is that these are all things we know, we feel, but we've been told for so long they don't matter. And
Mhm.
polyvagal theory also, it's a story about how we as humans and mammals evolved to be a social, collaborative, sometimes altruistic even species, right? And and how we are our best selves when we are safe and when we're able to present safety to other people. And I think increasingly people get locked into feelings of defense, feelings of aggression, feelings of whatever. And maybe they think that's human nature or something like that. But the truth is, our bodies thrive when we feel safe and when we are allowed to make others feel safe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And coming back to something you touched on earlier, which I wanted to circle back on, was we're constantly bombarded with information that is bringing about that threat and
Yeah.
fear. And perhaps you could even say that about the pandemic, right? There was that state of fear for a lot of people. And, oh, if you don't do these things or if you don't socially isolate, these are the consequences. So you see a lot of people walking around in fear. And then the news with constant bombardment of information around wars or all kinds of conflicts. And we touched on that briefly, but I do want to come back to that. And I think that's a state. And again, tying it back to polyvagal theory, how do you understand the impact that's having on our species in general, just being in that state and
Yeah.
absorbing all that information?
We as humans are a social species, right? We live in a world in which the reasons we evolved to be social are on the surface level oftentimes optional. We don't actually need to team up to go hunt or forage. You can just order delivery and never speak to another person or go, Zoom, whatever. And but our bodies crave that and in many ways and seek it out. And our nervous system and our physiology shifts when we're allowed to be social. There's a lot of attention paid on social media to ways to hack or tone or activate the vagus nerve, which calms and in many ways soothes and heals the body, of course. And all those hacks and tricks and tips are well and good. What polyvagal theory posits, though, is that face-to-face social interaction with people that make you feel safe is the most effective way of activating the vagus, right? And I think during the pandemic, many people, perhaps for the first time, felt what it felt like to be deprived of social interaction. And I think it surprised people how much they felt withered, how lost they felt, how unhealthy they felt. And I think but that's just who we are as humans. We need to be around other people. We really do. The pandemic was a very challenging time for people because we had this public health necessity of isolation, but sociability also is what allows our bodies to heal and stuff. And I think were we to face a similar pandemic or a similar situation in the future, hopefully we'll be a little more cognizant about what it does to people to isolate and finding ways, safe ways to make sure that impact doesn't affect people the same way.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, no, and then just broadening on in terms of the information we're constantly given too, right? I know we talked about that offline too. This state of fear or even otherizing people or
Yeah.
polarization we're seeing in society today, that's all having an impact on our species. And again, tying it back in terms of the social connection you touched on, I see it as very problematic, but I think recognizing that all of us start recognizing this and understanding, okay, perhaps we need to be careful and have a filter on how we're absorbing the information. That can be helpful, but not a lot of people can see that at times because they're just and the algorithms, unfortunately, on social media and all of
Mhm.
that, they're designed to keep giving you the information that you've been looking for. So it's
Yeah.
hard for you to get your head out of it.
Yeah. A- Again, like we live in a world that's increasingly optimized both by algorithms or artificial intelligence, whatever it may be, but also by cynical individuals who curate things in media channels or in the news, whatever it might be. Like people understand. They remember 20, 30 years ago, local news, something happened. It all just became gunshots and car chases. And the ratings go up and they stay up. I remember like, every news channel started being rebranded as Action News or something like that. And there, when we are inundated with feelings of threat, we say immensely engaged, but also our bodies literally de-resource the parts of the brain that allow for critical and independent thinking. There is a reason that every fascist, dictator, authoritarian strongman in human history has relied on the same playbook of, as you mentioned, creating some other, some villain, some group, some sense of fear that the populace needs to be wary of. Because when you feel afraid, that existential fear will you shut off the part of your brain that asks too many questions, right? And I think you look at history and you go, how could people have gone along with this or that, whatever it might be, some genocide? And they're scared. They're scared, and the brain operates in a very different way when you're scared. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of, hopefully not that many, but some at least cynical actors in the world who recognize this and weaponize this. And I think you see that happen in the world around us all the time these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been reflecting on just reading some of the communist movements in the Soviet Union too. And that was the same idea. It was like, it's us against them. And how do we push back and do all this? And it's just, again, it's, it's been there historically for a really long time. And to your point, people abuse it. And now we're seeing it at a different level because globally, we've probably never been so connected. So how can you spread that on a global level? And on the flip side, even with social media, I find a lot of people will replace real, authentic connections for these superficial relationships on social media and perhaps doing it over a screen, but not really going out of their way to have these social interactions in person, which to your point, and again, coming back to polyvagal theory, there's something to be said about the face to face in person interaction as opposed to substituting it for whatever we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like when through 99.999% of human evolution, the only way to socially interact with other individuals face to face before the written letter, before the telephone, of course, before the internet. And so when our nervous system is seeking to, you ever play the game The Sims? Like you have this character as this meter, and if you don't socialize, that meter goes down and your character starts like whimpering in a corner. You need to socialize to keep that meter up and to survive. Our nervous system operates the same way. It has a quota almost of social interaction it needs to get through the day, feel safe, do whatever. And to fill that quota, it looks for sort of these invisible cues that occur when we are in a face-to-face interaction with somebody. It's invisible dance of nervous systems where we're broadcasting and receiving signs of safety or signs of threat, signs of reciprocity, signs of love, signs of kindness, whatever it is, happens through voice, happens through facial expressions, happens through smell, happens through everything, right? And as social technologies become more and more lifelike, they become a little bit better at this, but there's no substitute for the real thing, is the truth. And in many ways, the fact that they're so lifelike can be a trap because it can tap into the addictive qualities, the fact that our body craves social interaction without giving our nervous system that boon, the feeling of completion and the health benefits that come from that. This is why it can be addictive to play online video games or just be on the internet all day or whatever it is, because when you are triggering, you're tickling, you're teasing the social nervous system without actually giving the nervous system the full face to face completion. And as new technologies come on the scene that are very lifelike, there's a trap that kind of unfolds here where these online interactions, phone calls, online video games, whatever it is, they can trigger and tease and just a little bit tap into our body's need, compulsion for social interaction. But because you don't have that full face to face interaction there, you don't get the full benefit. You don't, your nervous system doesn't give you credit for it, so to speak. And
Right.
so people can spend many hours playing games or locked online. I'm not trying to bash video games. Video games are great, but your body can spend many hours and never feel the sense of completion or fulfillment or health that can come from a very short face to face interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was listening to a Huberman Lab podcast recently too, an episode, and they were talking about, I think there's a misconception around people saying, "Oh, I'm introverted," and or versus being extroverted. And because I'm introverted, I don't like to engage too much socially. But I think again, there's that misconception that yes, just because you're introverted doesn't mean that you don't need that social interaction. You just need less of it, right? You energize more on your own, but you still need to have an ample amount of social interaction. And based on everything you've shared here, as our species do, but I think that's part of the problem too, when people take these terms and then misconstrue them. And often that could be misleading too, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Everybody needs social interaction. Every mammal needs social interaction is the truth. And I think that many of us might trick ourselves into thinking we don't. We're thinking that we're above it or different or whatever it is, but we're all human. We really are. We all need that. And I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, we all realize that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Seth, I really want to thank you for everything here and everything you've shared. I just want to make sure if there's anything else you feel like the listeners can take benefit from that perhaps we haven't covered here, if you wanted to perhaps share some of that would be helpful.
Yeah. You can just check out the book. It's called Our Polyvagal World, How Safety and Trauma Change Us by Dr. Stephen Porges and Seth Porges. It was a real joy to write the book with my dad. Really, honestly, an honor and a privilege. And I hope people enjoy it. We tried to make the book as understandable as possible.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you again for coming on the show and appreciate all the insight and wisdom you shared.
All right. You have a great day. Appreciate you.